There's tomatoes you prune, and then there's tomatoes that you don't prune, and that depends entirely on the type of tomato. Here's a classic sucker right at the stage that you want to get them.
I'm going Terminator in there, and I gotta be careful. Oh yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of janky stuff down here that's gotta go. Now, each plant is case dependent. I'm gonna take off half of that guy.
The amount that you prune will greatly affect fruit production. This is a really important point. It's not just for diseases that we prune. We actually prune to help the plant or to direct it in a certain way of making its fruits.
And look at that sexy bare stem right there.
Hey, you liking a tomato?
You liking a tomato? I make it nice for you.
Gardeners, new gardeners, garden curious. I've had so many questions over the years about pruning tomatoes over on my Instagram, which is a much bigger account. This is a brand new channel right here. Subscribe if you haven't already. Tons of gardening content coming, but I want to make a more comprehensive video on this subject. There's actually a lot to it, and I've addressed many little parts of this over the years in little bite-sized videos. This is going to be a much more comprehensive look at pruning tomatoes. It's everything you need to know and then some.
And if you're not coming over from my Instagram, you don't know yet that I grow over 1,000 pounds of food on this property, and a lot of that weight, look at that 2-pounder, comes from tomatoes. And the way you prune those plants has everything to do with their success.
So let's start off first things first. Word to the wise, do not prune in extreme heat. I'm actually going through a crazy heat wave here in central Ontario, and this is the coolest morning that I could get. Never prune in the middle of the day. Try and avoid hot times like this. I don't have a choice. I've actually been waiting for over a week for a good time to prune. My plants are so overdue for a pruning. I just don't have a better time. So do as I say, not as I do. I'm in an extreme situation here. The plants really need a haircut, and I think we're gonna be okay. Nice. There's a big cloud coming over, and it should be like this for the next few hours with any luck. So be very careful when you prune plants. We're gonna be doing something very destructive, very stressful to these plants. It's for their benefit in the long run, but you can really freak them out and put them back if you prune in heat. So try like early morning or as early as you can get, or late in the evening. And here's the next thing. Make sure there's no rain in the forecast. What we're trying to avoid primarily when we're pruning tomatoes is fungal pathogens, diseases, okay? And raindrops that splash down onto your soil or onto your mulch are the primary way that those pathogens get spread from plant to plant. So you don't want to be watering immediately after you prune, and you certainly don't want it to rain right after you prune. You have to give the plants time to heal over, to form like a hard crust on the places that you're going to cut to protect themselves. And like I said, I don't have rain in my forecast for days coming up. It's just overcast today. There's not rain attached to this with any luck, okay? And that's really important. Next, the amount that you prune will greatly affect fruit production. This is a really important point. It's not just for diseases that we prune. We actually prune to help the plant or to direct it in a certain way of making its fruits. If you don't prune a tomato at all, it'll make a lot more fruits, but they'll be smaller. And if you do a lot of canning like I do here on the homestead, pruning will encourage your plants to make bigger fruits. Less of them, but bigger fruits that are a lot easier to deal with when you're canning. So that's why I'm kind of a heavy pruner. And there's some sun poking out. Boo! Hey, Cloud, get over here. There's another big one rolling in. Me and you, brother. Let's do it. Let's do it together for the tomatoes. We're on the same team. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. There's tomatoes you prune, and then there's tomatoes that you don't prune, and that depends entirely on the type of tomato that you're looking at, that you have in front of you, that you're growing, okay? If you're not familiar with this concept, those two types are determinate tomatoes and indeterminate tomatoes. Determinate tomatoes are what people refer to as bush tomatoes. They grow to a certain size, a set determined size, and they make a sort of determined number of fruits. You don't really want to prune those much at all. Maybe some of the lower leaves, etc., and I'll show you some examples as we go along. The ones that really need pruning are indeterminate tomatoes, vining tomatoes that will keep growing, whose growth and whose fruit production is not defined, okay? They're indeterminate. And those ones really benefit from pruning. Here on the property, I grow almost exclusively indeterminate determinate tomatoes. I think I maybe have 2 or 3 determinate varieties. They're usually just cherry tomatoes, the ones that I happen to grow here. I like indeterminate tomatoes for a number of reasons I'll explain as we get into the pruning process. But basically it comes down to I can fit a lot more of them in a small space because I can grow them vertically rather than growing them out. That would be the main reason that I just love indeterminate tomatoes. But I also can have a lot of control over the fruit size, and I'm gonna explain more about that as we go along. So we're gonna mostly be working on indeterminate tomatoes today. That's really the subject of this video. I'll show you some determinate ones, but that's a very important distinction. But time's a ticking. Let's get moving here. I'm actually gonna start pruning. I'm gonna get in a lot closer and start going over a bunch of different important concepts with you because that sun is on the way. It's getting hot and I really don't wanna be pruning these tomatoes in the heat of the day. It's one of the most important points.
So let's have a look at these beauties and see why they're in such desperate need of pruning. First of all, this is a variety called Federle. This is my absolute favorite tomato variety to make salsa from. It's actually kind of a difficult tomato to grow. They're a little floopy and they're a little temperamental, etc. But do they ever make a great salsa? By far the best tomato out there. Why do they need such a big pruning? Well, there's a number of reasons, and let's start getting into that. Number one is the golden rule with tomatoes, especially on lower leaves like this janky one here, are you gotta remove anything that doesn't look good. Like anything at all. Let me get right in and show you the leaf spot that's happening on this guy. Boo, we don't wanna see any of that gonzo.
And now, smack dab in the middle of the summer, in the worst heat of the year, is when the fungal pathogens start to show up. I'm already seeing a leaf spot. I've seen signs of early blight, and the late blight is well on its way. You have to deal with this stuff now to keep your plants healthy. More as we go along.
And I've zoomed in really tight underneath the bed so you can really get an idea of what I'm talking about. You see all the leaf spot on these janky looking leaves. That can spread from plant to plant to plant. These are very tightly spaced. This is the reason I grow indeterminate tomatoes, again, to grow them up and not out. But I have to be very careful about the amount of contact between the plants because when you get a disease like that, it can rip through a bed like this like wildfire if you're not careful. You gotta pull all of that stuff right out.
And I mean pull it right out. It's actually a very destructive process. While I'm thinking of it, here's a good general rule for how much you should be pruning a plant. I think people would say like the rule of thumb, the golden rule would be don't prune more than 25 to 30%. I agree with that. I've gone a little either way and that's fine, but certainly don't go much over 30% in one go because you're gonna really stress out that plant and you could even kill it. That's not likely, but you'll definitely put back production and that's the last thing you want in a garden. Why are we growing tomatoes? For tomatoes, you want to get as many as you can.
So let's get back under here. Yeah, we don't want the plants touching each other, but also a super, super important concept in growing tomatoes or any plant is air and light. Air and light. If you have fresh air flowing through in between the plants, the spores from those fungal pathogens have far less chance to sort of like make contact and set in and start, like wrecking your plants. So you want air passing through there. You want cleansing sunlight coming down, hitting all the way down into the bottom leaves that you leave. Not all the way to the soil. I plant them really densely also to protect the soil from direct sun. That's a subject for a whole different video, but I like the soil shaded. The bottom leaves should get a little bit of sun, okay? And we're gonna achieve that with some pruning, but you need air and light in here because it's a freaking jungle otherwise, and too many little baddies circulating around in there in that confined space until you get that air and light.
And there's one last really important thing I need to mention before I actually start cutting.
And I'm talking about these bad boys. There's some hand pruning that you can do, but most of the pruning you're going to be doing with the branches, the sun leaves, etc. is going to be with a pair of shears, and you got to clean them in between every single plant. If there is a problem in there, and there probably is, you don't want to be spreading it from plant to plant to plant via the shears, and they get a spray in between every single plant. So before you start going to town in there, give them a spray liberally all the way on both sides, a whole bunch of it, because I'm going Terminator in there, and I got to be careful.
And let's do it. We're back in there. No time like the present. I'm going to be taking off 1, 2, 3 sets of leaves, okay? Check it out.
Boom. I know it feels bad. It hurts when you're first doing it, but trust me, you're doing this plant a favor. There's two. There's the third one, and those are all the spottiest, shittiest looking leaves gone. Look at that. Beautiful. Now, these little stumps need some time to dry. Like I said, there's no rain in the forecast, and I will not be watering these plants for at least a day or two until that heals over and I see it scab over. 1, 2, 3. And word to the wise, remove these shitty leaves immediately. You don't want those hanging around in there, and those don't even go in the compost. I often burn them or they go up into the bush away from the rest of my compost. It's worth noting, most of these fungal diseases are soil-borne. You put them in your compost, you're just putting more disease back down in your soil. Unless you're super, super confident in your hot composting abilities to kill that stuff off, I would avoid composting them altogether because some always gets through. Trust me, I've been doing this a long time. Now let me just remove some of these weeds under here that need to prune, and look at that sexy, sexy bare stem right there. Now, each plant is case dependent. Look at the next setup that I really didn't want to prune is already starting to spot out, and it's probably my fault. It's probably because I've left this for so long. These have to go. Let me pull the camera out and show you something. The top leaves of that branch, okay, all look pretty good. That leaf spot is in there. It's gonna make it there eventually, but these leaves are producing. They are helping out. They're collecting energy from the sun. So what you can do in a case like this is sort of like a half cut. Check it out. The bottom leaves are all looking janky. These ones, even underneath, look fine, and we'll keep, harvesting energy from the sun for this plant. And since, it really needs it at this time when it's starting to put on fruits, it needs as much energy from the sun as possible. Sunshine is the #1 plant food. Forget about all the fertilizers. It's sun that this plant needs. I'm going to take off half of that guy, okay? Leave those, keep an eye on them, and prune those when the time is right. But I'm buying that plant a whole bunch of extra energy by doing that.
All right, moving up the plant, and thank God these promised clouds are starting to show up. I really need that cloud cover, but I want to show you some interesting stuff up here. Now, out of an abundance of caution, I'm not recommending that you spray rubbing alcohol over your hands, but I'm going to do it just to make sure none of that leaf spot got onto my hands. And I don't want to be transferring any of that over. But look, I've already got fruit production happening, so I have to be very careful about all that stuff. I don't want to be transferring any diseases up the plant. I want to show you that this plant is string trellis. Now, this is a whole technique. I'll do a whole video on this at a later time, but no matter whether you're using stakes and tying your tomatoes that way, or whether you're string trellising or any other method, all the tips I'm giving you are exactly the same. But this guy, before I start pruning or even looking at some of these suckers that need to come off, etc., needs to be supported a little better. So I'm just going to step into here, and with this particular method, you just sort of wrap the plant around the string, okay? And actually, I will tell you what, my friend, we're going to change the string on this guy because it's the wrong guy. And again, I've let this go so far. I should not have to be doing this now, but it's important to guide this guy in the way that I need him to, because second point is that I have allowed this plant to bifurcate, and this is another tomato pruning technique that's really important for increased fruit production, even with indeterminate tomatoes, when you can get away with it. So check it out. I've wrapped that plant around the string. Actually, I can get that little branch around one more time. I've wrapped that plant around the string. Now it's a little better supported, and this bifurcation right here, I hope that's in the frame for you. You see this that I've allowed to happen is actually going to get me a bunch more tomatoes in the long run, but I need to tie this guy out to the trellis here to create a little space and air in between that bifurcation. All right, so check it out. I'm actually going to pull that plant out to the outside of the trellis. Again, I'm trying to just create some space in between these two arms of this plant. And I'm going to very loosely tie this bad boy onto the trellis. And this is another really important tomato pruning tip. When you're doing that, you have to leave all of your supportive ties really loose to leave that plant room to grow. You don't tie them tight to the stem ever. Okay, so nice loose knot like this, okay? It's just guiding it. You're guiding this plant away from his little buddy there, and look, nice and secure. And now we can start thinking about pruning that the plant is well supported. This area is kind of looking okay. Now I'm moving up the plant, okay? What I'm looking for are suckers. If you've never pruned a tomato before, it's all the little extra growths on an indeterminate tomato. Look, there's a massive one here that I'm gonna cut off. Let me zoom in and show you, because it's really important to cut these. Every time a plant makes a sucker like that, that's a new plant, and it has to support all of that new growth and all of the fruits it might make. I've already let this go once from a sucker to get more tomatoes. I can't let it go twice, planted this densely. This guy is coming off. All right, I've got a slightly better angle for you to see that sucker growing up from the crook in between the branch and the main stem. I could cut this, right? I've got nice clean shears. I could cut it off, but I do want to show you the other way of doing this, especially with suckers, is you can just hand prune these. Watch this. I'm going to snap it off. Done. And now that guy's dead. This guy's going to heal over, and we're going to focus all the energy to plant up this to these new fruits here and to further growth up here. But hold on, we're going to pull back. There's a really, really important point to make about hand pruning. You better make sure your hands are good and clean if you're touching the plant higher up when you've maybe handled something that was diseased lower down on the plant, because you'll be spreading that pathogen up the plant. And trust me, if you do that, if you make that fatal mistake, you're going to be shortening the life of this plant and drastically reducing production. So, you know, that little spray in between is something. You could wash them. You could just be really careful, but pay special attention to the cleanliness of your hands if you maybe touched something janky down at the bottom. All right. Now, I do a lot of hand pruning here, but it's because I grow a ton of tomatoes here. I've got over 80 plants in this year. Anything that can save me time is a good thing, but I'm hyper conscious of the cleanliness of my hands when I'm touching the plants higher up. Now, just while I'm in here, I see another tiny little sucker. Let me show you this guy. You see that? This part of it is a sunleaf. That would be inoffensive. It takes a little bit of time to get to know the difference between them and be able to identify, oh, that's a sunleaf, that's not a sucker. But look right behind it. There is actually a tiny little sucker coming, and I don't want that guy. I'm pulling that. See that? Right in the crook. Gonzo. And I think that's good for this plant for now. I don't want to take any more off it for the time being. Let's move on to another plant. I'd say that's roughly 25-30%, no more. It's too hot for that.
And a plant that I'd like to move on to is something that's a little more typical, a lot more typical. The vast majority of the plants are like this, straight up and down, that have already been suckered, that have not bifurcated. That bifurcated one was maybe a little weird to start off with, but let me zoom in a little bit and show you this guy. It's just a straight single stem, and this is actually referred to as single stemming in, fancy tomato circles. But you can see there's a great big sucker there that needs to go. There's probably a bunch of leaves that need to go off the bottom, but that single stem is much more typical and how most people would grow an indeterminate tomato. When you allow them to split, that's kind of an advanced technique, I guess I would say. Most people grow them straight up and down, but I wanted to show you both. So let's get into this guy. Let's start at the bottom. Make sure that it's nice and clean, and then it needs a wrap. Okay, this guy, yeah, he definitely needs a wrap. There's some space there. You got to support these tomatoes really, really well, especially when the fruits come, man. They get so heavy. You're going to have pounds and pounds and pounds of tomatoes on each plant, and they need to be well supported all the way up and down their length. But let's start at the bottom, work our way up. Oh yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of janky stuff down here that's got to go. These guys are freshly sprayed, okay? And we're just going whole hog on this guy, man. Terminator style. 1, 2 at least. I'm going to go up one more and have a look. Yeah, there's an end here that doesn't look good, etc. And we're just going to pull that sucker off the bottom. You see this right here? Hold on. It's not in frame for you. Let me pull it down. All right, you see this little sucker at the bottom? Most indeterminate varieties of tomatoes do this. They make a sucker all the way along the plant, and they often do it right at the soil level. You definitely don't want that growing up and robbing energy from your plant. That guy's gone. Hey, come here. And that is honestly looking pretty great. No more that I want to take off it right now. Let's head up further up the plant, grab some suckers, and support this guy. So first things first, out of an abundance of caution, I'm actually going to just spray my little fingertips here. Okay, now, I don't know if you should do this or not. This is a thing that I do, but I'm hyper conscious about it. You should be too. You do whatever you want. Go wash them with soap if you need to. I'm doing that. But now what I need to do is support this plant before I start pruning. This is kind of just a really good habit to get into. It makes you think of it. And again, oh no, and I just totally messed up. Look at that. I can fix that. I might be able to fix that. Hold on, this is a good opportunity to show you a technique for saving branches that you break like a freaking idiot. That was not necessary. Hold on, let me support this guy. Wrap that around. Okay, that's good enough for now, but I just broke that. Let me zoom in. I'm gonna get a piece of tape and show you that I can probably save that branch. Oh, that really pisses me off. I'm gonna pull this sucker right here too. So check out this technique. I've got a little bit of painter's tape here.
You can use any old tape you like, but often, if it's still intact, if it hasn't broken right off and there's some connection with the mother plant, you can save that thing. The plant will repair itself. These plants are amazing. I hope you can see that. So I'm not guaranteeing this works, but try it. Honestly, I have saved hundreds of branches and even fruits that I've messed up in the past. So check it out. Is there good contact? Yes, there is. This one could work out. All you need to do is support it a little bit. I'm gonna take that tape underneath, okay? I'm gonna wrap it around like this. I'm gonna wrap it around the other way, and it doesn't look pretty, but trust me, if you can support that a little bit, I might even give that a little additional tie, but I think it's gonna be okay. That guy is probably gonna heal. There's a slightly closer look for you just to have an idea of what's really happening here. Plants are amazing, man. Tomatoes are so resilient if you just give them a little help, and that tape can do that for you. All right, whew, tragedy narrowly avoided. I'm just gonna pull some of these branches apart, see what's really going on under here. Yeah, I've got some fruits. I'm not seeing any suckers that need attention, except this guy. Hey, is that in frame for you? See that guy? Let me zoom in. Here's a classic sucker right at the stage that you wanna get him. Can you guys see that? The smaller you get it, that big one that I did was a total, my bad, man. That should never have happened. When you can get them at this stage, you're gonna save a lot of growth and energy for your plant to go upwards and make fruits. Pull that little bad boy off as soon as possible.
And that particular plant is looking great all the way up for the rest. Nothing more to do. Let's move on.
All right, guys, I really got to get moving while this cloud cover holds. I've got this whole bed to prune and then another bed beside it to get done before the heat of the day. Morning is ticking on. So I'm going to throw you on the time lapse. I'll drop a bunch more information on that time lapse, but I got to give her. You like it, a tomato? You like it? I make it nice for you.
And what you're seeing here is janky leaf removal, making air and light. Am I right?
And friends, look at all this beautiful air and light underneath these plants. This is exactly what you need. Long overdue. Make it look like that. Look, even from the top, you can see how much more open and how much more that is breathing, man. This is exactly what we need. Now, I've got to go up and support them all a little better. I've got to do some ties to the trellis, etc. I'm going to put you on the time lapse again, but we're looking really, really good here already.
Hey, what's up, ladies? How you doing?
And now I thoroughly clean my hands again. I'm gonna keep doubling down on that point, and I'm going around the bed, supporting these plants to the best of my ability.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Okay, now we got to get a whole bunch of suckers that I saw in there.
There's one. Bite. And here's a tiny one on the plant right beside it. Don't neglect to pull those little guys. That's going to grow into a big one. Just get it while you can. Like I said, the smaller, the better. All right, guys, I can't show you every single one in here. There's like 100 I got to grab, but you see that guy right there? Look, right beside it is a sunleaf. Just FYI, that's a sunleaf. Leave that guy alone. He's harvesting energy. What you don't want is this new plant.
And here I go picking out dozens and dozens of suckers. Indeterminate tomatoes produce them prolifically.
All right, that's looking pretty freaking sweet. And I want to show you a little bit of what I did in here so you get an idea of what's going on. And I actually left a couple that I'm going to prune to really double down on the point of the suckers, man, because I don't know if I've paid enough attention to it. I think everyone knows that's growing an indeterminate tomato, you got to pull those off. But it's really important to understand why and when you should leave them. First things first, I had some really big suckers that I was negligent on. Like something that size should have been gone quite a long time ago, but I didn't get to it. You find one, get rid of it. And then I found obviously a whole bunch of smaller ones like that. That's kind of an ideal size. You know, you got to let them grow so you know what you're looking at for sure. And it's not something you want to keep. There are some tomato varieties that actually will fruit from the crook. It's actually quite rare. I don't grow any of them. But sometimes, you know, tomatoes are funny. They'll just morph a little flower stem out of that crook where a sucker would be. And you have to watch for it. So anyway, long story short, that's not what that was, Gonzo. And I don't know if you noticed, I was cleaning my hands all the way along while I was pruning these tomatoes. I just did it again because I want to show you this here. This would be a great natural bifurcation point. You see where the plant has actually split. That wasn't a sucker. It just wanted to do that, and that can happen. But here's the thing. You've got a whole nother growth tip, right? This guy here is the actual growth tip coming up that tomato. So unless you want to bifurcate the plant and you have enough room to do so and make more fruits, you got to pick one, right, between these two. Now, this is the natural one. It looks like to me. There's a nice branch off the bottom of that one. This guy is gonna go. I should do this one with the scissors, but since I got it right under my hand, I'm just gonna prune that off. Boom, and now I've got a growth tip that I can count on to go straight up. And look at this sucker here. This is one that should have been pruned a long time ago. I'm going to do it properly with freshly alcoholed up shears. That guy's got to go. That's actually a big one, robbing tons of energy from your plant. And you know what I'm going to point out to you too? This is not a thing you really need to know, but it is kind of useful when you're trying to identify a sucker if you're a new gardener. They almost always come right below where fruits are coming. So whenever you see a little fruit spur like that, actually fruit spur is a tree term. I don't know what we call it on a tomato. The little trellis there that holds the tomatoes. 9 times out of 10, that little sucker's going to come right below where those flowers are. Oh, and there's a little shit I missed right at the top of that plant. How did I miss that one? We want that growth tip to go all on his own. Do his thing, not be impeded, not have energy sucked out by this guy. I guess that's why they call them suckers. Sucker. And while the sun's out, let me show you that example of a determinate tomato. I have hardly any in the garden. This one I believe is called banana legs. It is a cherry tomato, a yellow variety, and it makes kind of like big long fruits, but that's not the point. I want to show you that it's been hardly pruned at all. The top and every single little sucker you see coming out of it has been allowed to go. All I've pruned on this plant are the bottom lower leaves, which you should do for disease reasons, but let me get around that basil. Look at this little sumbitch right here. You see that sucker? That would be gonzo on an indeterminate tomato. I'm going to leave that guy, let it grow up because it'll make more fruits. And that's kind of the only chance it has to make more branches or fruits. It's only going to happen one time on a determinate plant. So you leave that guy, you let him get bigger, you kind of, support it in any way you can and just let it do its thing. Deal with the bottom. Don't let disease creep up that plant, but the rest just kind of gets a free pass and it goes. Now, to be honest with you, I could go a little further, but I'm not going to because of that heat that's coming and the heat stress that they've been under. We just cannot get a break from extreme heat here. It seems in the last couple of weeks, and there's only more coming. So I'm going to be conservative this time around. I would like a little more air and light in there, right? That's what it's all about. Air and light, air and light. But it's going to have to wait at least a few days, if not maybe, I'll probably leave it a couple of weeks until these fully recover, and then I'll start thinking about pruning again. And quickly, let me double down on this. All these spotty, blighty leaves that don't look good, do not go in the compost. Trust me on this one. They're going elsewhere.
So friends, that's how you do it. I think I've showed you pretty much everything you need to know. There's a little more to it. I'll drop in some voiceovers here and there and try and fill in some of the gaps, but I've got a whole nother bed of paste tomatoes to still do while it's still morning and while I still got that cloud cover. I gotta move. Things never really stop here in the garden and I gotta keep on it.
And here's a bird's eye view of that second bed I did on my own off camera. Look at all that air and light. And here's a bird's eye of that bed we worked on together. Look how sexy and open and spacious it is. And here's a bird's eye of both of those beds together. Look at all that airflow. Look at all that sun getting down in there. There's a bonus shot for you. And speaking of bonuses, I want to show you a really good watering technique that you can use the next day after you've pruned the plants and they really need that water.
Take the nozzle off.
Now grab the end of that hose with just your thumb, turn your hand over, and you can start watering those plants super deeply without splashing any water up onto the parts that you just pruned. The wounds on those plants need at least a day or two to properly heal and scab over, but these plants also really need water right now in this critical time, and this is a great way of achieving both of those objectives.
So folks, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for hanging out all the way to the end. If you're an experienced gardener, I hope I gave you some food for thought. If you're a new gardener, I hope you learned something new about pruning tomatoes. Stay tuned. There's a ton of gardening content coming down the pipe. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell icon for notifications, and I'll catch you next Thursday at 7. Peace.